Hello there, and welcome to Echoes of the Imperium. I'm truly glad you've arrived. Maybe it's been a long day, or maybe you're the kind of soul who prefers to drift into sleep with thoughts of distant stars and ancient cosmic secrets instead of counting sheep. Either way, tonight's journey belongs to you. You don't need to do anything now, just rest. Let your mind grow quiet, your breath steady, and your body feel lighter. As if even the pull of gravity has begun to fade away. I remember the moment the distortion began, though the chronoservators insist no such moment existed, and perhaps that is the truth. In the Immaterium there are no moments, only tides of memory and emotion masquerading as time, and I, archivist Cale Veritas of the Sigillites' Forbidden Order, was foolish enough to believe I could observe such tides without drowning in them. For the first sign that something unnatural was tearing through the warp was not an explosion of demonic light or screaming psychic feedback, but a silence so total it felt carved with deliberate malice, a silence that suffocated thought and stripped breath from the soul. And when I lifted my gaze from the vellum slate, I saw the tear forming in the far distance like a wound in the very idea of space. A thin vertical line of green fire that burned with no heat yet pushed against the fabric of reality like an invading blade. And before I could seal my mind behind the wards, visions flooded me. Visions not sent by demon, God or psyker, but by something else entirely. Something brutally alive, something profoundly mortal yet irreconcilably wrong in its refusal to obey the warp's rules. And in that instant I felt the Emperor's shadow brush against my thoughts, not in words but in pressure. A subtle reminder that I was witnessing an anomaly even he had not foreseen. And as the tear widened, the warp recoiled like a living sea parting around a creature it instinctively feared. The air trembled. The astral anchors groaned. And then he stepped through. The being who emerged bore no warp signature, no psychic imprint, no resonance of the soul. He was simply matter and will, a slab of mortal hatred condensed into a humanoid form wrapped in Praetor-era armor unfamiliar to any Mechanicus schema, its runic green lines pulsing like the heartbeat of a caged titan. And the moment his armored boots touched the phase platform, every demon echo in the Immaterium shrieked and fled, as though a predator greater than themselves had entered their hunting grounds. I felt his presence like a fist around my lungs. Not psychic, not mystical, but visceral, a rage so pure it bypassed the soul and gripped the body directly. And as he surveyed the warp station with slow, deliberate judgment, I realized he was not assessing threats. He was searching for one. Searching for the threat, the greatest threat, and perhaps, Emperor help us, he had sensed him. I activated my Vox sigil to warn the Sigillite, but the moment the micro-spirit chirped to life, the intruder's helmet snapped toward me with predatory precision. He didn't move, yet every instinct in my bones screamed that if I spoke another syllable I would be eviscerated across 12 dimensions. So I remained still, watching as he turned his attention toward the distant throne echo, the psychic lighthouse at the heart of this hidden station. And I knew then that the impossible was unfolding. A being with no warp presence was resisting the warp simply by existing within it, carving out reality around himself through raw force of will, and the warp hated him for it. The same way a living organism rejects a splinter, violently, urgently, instinctively. I staggered as tendrils of Immaterium stormed toward him, swirling clouds of crimson malice forming claws, teeth, shapes of agony that would have shredded any mortal mind. But the intruder merely tilted his helmet as if the manifestation irritated him, and with a motion so fast my eyes barely registered it, he ripped the demon construct apart with his bare hands, reducing it to screaming light that evaporated before hitting the ground. Something in me broke at the sight, not from fear, though fear was certainly there, but from recognition. For in that brutal efficiency I felt echoes of ancient Terran myth, the primordial warrior archetype, the hunter of monsters who required no sorcery, no blessing, no divine authority, only purpose. And yet the warp storm intensified, gathering strength around him like a hurricane of hatred. I saw colors that do not exist in the Materium, felt the pressure of 1,000 malignant sentiences trying to crush him, twist him, assimilate him into meaninglessness. But he did not bend, and the warp, accustomed to reshaping every mortal who entered it, recoiled in confusion, as if the very concept of change could not apply to him. I realized then with dawning horror that the warp did not perceive him as a mortal at all. It perceived him as a weapon, a foreign weapon, a weapon designed to exterminate that which the warp feeds upon, A weapon forged from a universe where gods are slain, not worshipped. My breath fogged, my wards dimmed. My skull throbbed with the pressure of colliding mythologies. And then, for the briefest instant, the intruder's visor shifted toward me again. Not in threat, but in recognition, as though he could sense that I understood something of him, even if only the outline of a truth too vast to hold. That was when the Emperor arrived, not in his physical golden shell, but through a projection of psychic luminance so overwhelming that the station's ward circuits screamed and burst into molten slag. His presence swept over me like a tidal wave of impossible clarity, the air crystallizing into fractal shapes under the weight of his consciousness, and even the warp recoiled from him, torn between apex predator and apex predator, two incompatible divine forces twisting the immaterium into knots around them. The Doomslayer turned fully toward the apparition, fists tightening, body shifting into combat stance with the instinctual precision of a being who has spent an eternity preparing for this moment, whether he knew it or not. The Emperor's voice was not sound but truth, vibrating through every atom of the station as he spoke a single phrase. "You do not belong in my realm." But if the Slayer heard, he did not care. He launched forward with impossible speed, and the warp exploded into white fire. The moment the Doomslayer hurled himself toward the Emperor's luminous form, the immaterium convulsed like a wounded animal, and I, still clinging to the fracturing platform, felt the psychic aftershock slam into my skull with such force that my vision shattered into kaleidoscopic fragments. I saw 10 versions of the same truth layered atop one another, realities splitting and rejoining like strands of molten glass, and in all of them, the two figures collided at the center of an impossible battleground. The Emperor's radiant avatar, a being of pure psychic authority woven from the will of 10,000 sacrificed minds, and the intruder, immortal theoretically, yet moving with such relentless, unyielding velocity that the warp struggled to interpret him, as though it could only understand his purpose, not his nature. When their clash finally resolved into singular perception, it was not a blow but a shockwave of intent, one forged of divine command, the other of absolute defiance, and the resulting impact ruptured the air into spiraling vortices of white-gold flame and sickly green distortion. The Emperor's projection towered above him, an astral giant wrapped in halos of burning sigils, every line of his form carved in the solemn geometry of a god architect who had dissected eternity and found it wanting. Yet the Doomslayer did not hesitate, did not awe, did not even blink, for his movements flowed from a brutality so focused it resembled serenity, a monastic devotion to violence so absolute it bordered on holiness. I watched, frozen, as the Slayer's fist met the Emperor's outstretched palm, mortal gauntlet against psychic godhand, and the backlash peeled layers of the warp away like rotting cloth, revealing beneath it a glimpse of raw, screaming potential, the unformed madness that existed before thought, before sin, before gods themselves, and for a moment I felt its hunger reach for me, whispering my name with the voices of every regret I had ever buried. I staggered backward, clutching my head, trying to suppress the bleed of their battle into my mind, but every attempt at mental discipline dissolved beneath the sheer magnitude of their confrontation. The Emperor's presence pressed into my skull like the weight of planets, demanding obeisance, clarity, understanding, while the Doomslayer's aura tore through that clarity like a chainsaw carved from raw antipathy, broadcasting nothing but an emotion so primal it bypassed translation. No more demons. And though he stood before the Emperor of mankind, the Slayer's instinct recognized no hierarchy higher than his mission, no divinity greater than the duty etched into his bones. The Emperor shifted his stance, drawing upon the warp in a way that made the surrounding reality scream. His avatar condensed into a single point of blinding force, then expanded outward in a shockwave that would have turned entire armies to dust. But the Slayer dug his boots into the shifting floor and leaned into the blast, muscles straining, armor screaming under the pressure yet refusing to fail. The force shredded the surrounding structure, ripping apart steel, stone, psychic wards, even the memory of architecture, leaving only a storm-racked void of drifting debris and flickering warp light. And in that floating, impossible arena, the Doomslayer surged forward again with a roarless fury, seizing the Emperor's arm and attempting to wrench it downward, not to defeat a god but to end an obstacle, to break the thing standing between him and the next battlefield he felt compelled to cleanse. The Emperor's eyes, two golden suns, impossibly calm, narrowed with both realization and disappointment. He gazed upon the Slayer the way a father might regard a feral child who refused guidance. And though his voice did not echo through sound, its meaning thundered directly into my mind. You are not of this galaxy. You are not of this war. Yet you would bring annihilation to that which you do not understand. But the Doomslayer, unbound by telepathy, by psychic dominance, by the subtle hooks of mental influence that would have enslaved any mortal, yanked the Emperor closer and drove his knee upward in a bone-cracking strike that would have shattered a Primarch's ribcage. The Emperor's form flickered, momentarily destabilized, not from pain, for such a thing was far beneath him, but from the sheer impossibility of the attack connecting at all. The warp flickered. Colors reversed. Gravity inverted. I felt myself rising, falling, rising again, trapped in the tides of their undiluted wills, colliding with such intensity that the Imperium itself struggled to mediate whose truth should dominate. This was not a battle of strength. It was a battle of definitions. The Emperor was a god of order. His order, imperfect yet absolute, crafted from humanity's collective potential. The Doomslayer was a godless wrath, anti-chaos incarnate, an extinction event given armor and flesh. And as their struggle escalated, I saw fractures appear not just in space, but in meaning. Sigils of ancient Terran dialects burned across the void, rewriting themselves every second, unable to decide which mythos governed this confrontation. I felt the raw psychic pulse of the Emperor begin to rise, intensifying like the sun preparing to ignite, and I sensed the edge of his disappointment sharpening into resolve. He had tried to assess the intruder. Now he would end him, but the Slayer had no concept of ending, only continuing. He leapt onto the Emperor's luminous arm, sprinting up that radiant limb with a feral determination, drawing from somewhere within his armor a crucible blade forged from unknown matter, a weapon that hummed not with energy but with raw hatred. And as he raised it, intending to drive it into the Emperor's throat, the warp itself recoiled in terror. For the blade carried a resonance the Imperium despised, a resonance that felt like extinction, a resonance that promised the one thing chaos feared most: finality. The Emperor caught the blade between two radiant fingers, stopping its descent with effortless precision. Yet even he seemed to register the anomaly of its material, turning his gaze upon the weapon with something not unlike curiosity tainted by caution. The Doomslayer pushed harder, gauntlets trembling, boots carving deep grooves in the Emperor's shimmering form as he poured every fragment of will, fury, and purpose into the strike. And that was the moment everything broke. The Emperor unleashed a burst of psychic force, so concentrated it resembled a star vomiting its own core, and the blast hurled the Slayer across the torn reality, slamming him into the remnants of the warp platform with enough force to pulverize mountains. Yet before the Emperor's luminance dimmed, before the echoes of his power faded, before I could even comprehend the scale of what had happened, the Doomslayer stood back up. Without hesitation, without pain, without fear, he looked at the Emperor not as a god, not as a ruler, but as an adversary whose strength had merely been assessed. Then he stepped forward, calmly, deliberately, and clenched his fists as if preparing for round two. I felt tears rise unbidden to my eyes, not from emotion but from the sheer psychic strain of witnessing this contradiction, this living impossibility, this collision of absolute wills in a universe not built to contain both. And then the Emperor spoke again, quiet, measured, tragic. "Very well, Slayer. If you seek a war beyond any you have known, I will show you its cost." The Emperor's words hung in the shredded air like a prophecy carved from burning metal, and in the moment following that quiet declaration, the warp seemed to inhale. Every demonic current, every malignant echo, every whispering fragment of thought withdrew like recoiling serpents, as though the Imperium itself feared what the Emperor intended to reveal. I clung to the surviving edge of the platform, trying to steady my mind as it pulsed with afterimages of golden fire and impossible geometry. But the psychic pressure around us expanded again, swelling into a vast sphere of ordered will that bent the warp into symmetrical patterns, stabilizing it just long enough for the Emperor to shape it into a battleground of his choosing. Runes emerged beneath my feet, glowing in perfect alignment, ancient mathematical sigils that hummed with the resonance of psychic authority, and the void around us condensed into a crystalline horizon of shimmering gold and white, a domain constructed not from matter but from memory, his memory. And as the light softened into a haunting sepia glow, I realized he was not creating a battlefield. He was revealing one. The Doomslayer stood unmoved, visor reflecting the newborn landscape, fists still clenched, stance lowered in wordless defiance. He did not understand what he was being shown, or perhaps he did, and simply didn't care. The Emperor's voice unfurled again, not in anger but in a weary, mournful cadence that resonated like a confession etched into the bones of creation. Before you judge the cost of this war, Slayer, you must see the cost I have already paid. And the golden horizon flickered, shifted, darkened. Suddenly we were standing upon the ashen plains of old Earth, not as they exist now, polluted and haunted by 10,000 years of war, but as they existed during the darkest epoch of humanity's forgotten past, the Age of Strife, a time when psychers bloomed like cancers, when warp storms tore continents apart, when humanity cannibalized its own soul. I saw towering spires and ruins, broken arcologies collapsing beneath black skies streaked with lightning made of screaming faces. Mutant warlords battled across irradiated wastelands, their armies clashing in tides of flesh and metal, and above them, colossal warp entities devoured cities whole, tendrils writhing through the air like a nest of vipers feasting upon the despair of billions. I felt those memories sear into my mind, the desperation, the hopelessness, the knowledge that humanity had been a hair's breadth from extinction. The Emperor stood among the visions like a ghost revisiting his own sins, his golden form dimmed by sorrow. And he turned his gaze toward the Doomslayer with a gravity so immense it warped the flickering images around him. "I did not choose godhood," he said, his voice thick with centuries of buried grief. "I chose survival. For them." But the Doomslayer merely tilted his helmet, the faintest twitch of posture indicating confusion or disdain. He had witnessed worse than this in his own universe, I realized. Hellscapes, demon worlds, galaxies reduced to sacrificial altars. To him, this was not tragedy. It was familiarity. The Emperor seemed to sense this interpretation, or misinterpretation, and the golden landscape dissolved again, replaced by another terrible memory, the Unification Wars. Millions of warriors, gene-grafted monstrosities, techno-barbarian tribes armed with rad weapons and plasma lances clashed beneath a blood-red sky. And amidst that chaos marched the Thunder Warriors, each one a hulking brute of engineered perfection, tearing through enemies with devastating force, until they too fell, bodies collapsing into heaps of unstable flesh, victims of their own flawed design. I saw them scream as their organs liquefied, as their genetic templates unraveled into ruin, and the Emperor watched them die with the silent acceptance of a creator forced to dispose of his earliest sacrifices. The Doomslayer's fist tightened, not in sympathy but in recognition of necessity. He understood war. He understood sacrifice. The Emperor let the vision linger a moment longer before the world shifted once more, revealing the next memory in this terrible litany. The Great Crusade unfolded around us in all its brutal splendor, shining fleets launching into the void like spears of burning light, billions of soldiers chanting litanies of unity, worlds liberated or subjugated under the banner of a golden ideal. Yet the Emperor did not show the triumphs, only the failures, the atrocities committed in his name. The civilizations burned because they would not kneel. The psychers he purged by the millions to prevent demonic incursions. The Primarchs torn from him by chaos, the broken trust, the eventual rebellion. Horus standing against him, eyes corrupted, blade dripping with the blood of brothers. And finally, the throne, that cursed eternal prison of golden stagnation. The Emperor's voice cracked when he spoke again, not from weakness, but from truth too heavy to bear. Every empire demands a sacrifice. Mine demanded everything. The Doomslayer did not bow, did not soften, did not acknowledge tragedy or remorse. He simply stepped forward slowly as though evaluating the Emperor's memories the same way he evaluated battlefield debris, searching for the quickest path to the next target. It struck me then with chilling clarity. The Slayer does not fight wars for ideals. He fights to end them by killing every enemy until none remain. And the Emperor fights wars to preserve the species that created him. Their philosophies were incompatible. Fundamentally, profoundly incompatible. The Emperor realized this as well, for his projection's eyes dimmed with a sadness deeper than cosmic. "You believe the solution to evil is the annihilation of all who bear it," he said softly. "But here in this galaxy, evil is not a foe to be slain. It is a reflection of the human soul, magnified across the warp. Kill all who are corrupted, and you kill humanity itself." The Slayer didn't flinch, didn't move. He simply stared at the Emperor, the closest thing his world had ever known to a divine being, and raised his fists again, as if to say, "Then so be it." The Emperor sighed, a sound like a dying star collapsing into itself. "Very well," he whispered. "Then I will show you the future you would create." The world exploded. Suddenly we were standing amidst a dead galaxy. Not metaphorical, not symbolic. A literal future where every world was a silent grave, where the stars had dimmed into embers, where ghostly echoes of extinct civilizations drifted like ash in the void. There were no humans, no daemons, no gods, no hope. Nothing remained except dust and a single rusted helmet half buried in the cosmic soil, a Doomslayer visor, cracked down the center. The Emperor gestured toward this vision with a trembling hand, his voice hollow. "Your path ends in emptiness, Slayer. Mine ends in sacrifice. Choose which future you prefer." For the first time, the Doomslayer hesitated, not in fear, not in confusion, but in something far more terrifying: thought. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath, and then, without warning, without signal, without even the faintest change in posture, the Doomslayer lunged. The moment the Doomslayer lunged, the dead galaxy shattered like brittle glass, and the Emperor's constructed vision imploded into a vortex of collapsing starlight, dragging the two titanic forces into a spiraling whirlpool of psychic recoil so violent it felt as though the Imperium itself was screaming. I clung to the remnants of the golden memory plane as it cracked beneath my fingertips, my senses convulsing in and out of alignment as realities overlapped, fractured, and bled into each other in a frenzy of impossible geometry. The Slayer's charge carried a momentum that defied physics, pure forward aggression carved into motion itself, and he closed the distance in an instant. Fists angled toward the Emperor's chest like meteoric projectiles engineered solely to end gods. The Emperor's avatar turned, not with panic or haste, but with the slow, sorrowful grace of inevitability, his hand rising in a gesture that was neither defensive nor retaliatory, but almost paternal. Yet the instant his radiant palm brushed the Doomslayer's gauntlet, reality detonated. A blast of raw psychic force erupted outward, ripping the surrounding dimensional fabric into whirling ribbons of light and void. I felt myself hurled through a curtain of screaming color, tumbling as the warp twisted itself into a new configuration, stabilizing just enough to craft another unthinkable space, an arena forged not from memory, nor from prophecy, but from the truth of their collision. When I finally regained focus, I found myself kneeling upon the fractured remnants of a colossal marble bridge suspended over an infinite chasm of starless black, broken statues littering the span like corpses of forgotten titans. It took only a moment to realize what I was seeing, the ruins of the Imperial Palace as it exists in the warp, its psychic echo twisted by 10,000 years of accumulated suffering, devotion, and psychic resonance. The Doomslayer stood at one end of the shattered causeway, armor flickering with residual green fire, body coiled like a weapon moments from detonation. The Emperor, his avatar now dimmed but more focused, stood at the other, golden cloak billowing in the warp storm that circled this impossible fortress. The air between them vibrated with a tension so sharp it felt like the prelude to extinction, and I could sense that this time, the Emperor was done revealing memories. Done persuading, done warning. He would now speak only in the language the Slayer understood: combat. Yet even now, even in the face of unyielding opposition, the Emperor's presence radiated a tragic patience. He extended one hand, palm open, and for a heartbeat I hoped, he might offer the Slayer a final chance to stand down. But the Doomslayer charged. The sound of his sprint echoed across the bridge like cannon fire, and he launched himself into the air, aiming a brutal hammer strike directly at the Emperor's head. The Emperor slid aside with a motion equal parts elegant and devastating, sweeping his arm in a crescent arc that channeled a wave of psychic force capable of turning continents to vapor. The Doomslayer hit the wave head-on, boots digging furrows into the marble as he leaned forward, pushing through the avalanche of psychic annihilation with the unstoppable determination of a star falling toward its death. The Emperor's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in a kind of resigned respect, as the Slayer broke through the blast and tackled him with a ferocity that would have obliterated any physical form. But the Emperor did not break. He allowed the hit, absorbing the force, letting the Doomslayer drive him backward across the bridge as golden sparks erupted with every impact. The Doomslayer struck again and again, each blow a brutal punctuation of his eternal mission, fists slamming into divine armor with the stubborn insistence of a creature who refused to recognize impossibility. Then the Emperor finally retaliated. With a single motion, no flourish, no aggression, only necessity. He placed his hand against the Doomslayer's chest and whispered a word in a language older than human memory. The sound of it bypassed the ears entirely, vibrating through bone and thought, and the force behind it hurled the Slayer backward with such violence that he skidded across the marble, carving a trail of molten stone in his wake. His armor dimmed for the first time, runes flickering like dying embers, yet even as the cracks spread across his breastplate, he rose again, shaking his head once, almost like a beast clearing blood from its eyes. And then he charged again. This time the Emperor met him halfway, and the collision sent a ripple of destructive resonance rolling outward. Statues crumbled, pillars snapped. The chasm below roared with unseen depths. I felt something warm trickle from my nose. Blood, I realized dimly, but I couldn't look away. I was witnessing not merely a battle, but a collision of philosophies. A direct clash between order and wrath so fundamental that the warp struggled to interpret it. The Doomslayer fought like a tidal wave of sharpened instinct. No hesitation, no doubt, no thought beyond the next strike. The Emperor fought like a master architect, dismantling a collapsing structure. Every motion deliberate, calculated, sorrowful. It was terrifyingly clear that he was holding back. That even now, even as the Slayer attempted to tear his avatar to pieces, the Emperor was restraining a scale of power that could have erased this entire dimension. But the Doomslayer didn't know how to hold back. He ripped a shattered marble column from the ground and swung it like a club, shattering it against the Emperor's shoulder in an explosion of dust and divine sparks. The Emperor retaliated by twisting the air itself, compressing gravity around the Slayer until stone fractured under his knees. Yet the Slayer snarled, actually snarled, and forced his way through the crushing field inch by inch, fury overpowering physics through raw defiance. At that moment, I saw something change in the Emperor's expression. Not fear, not surprise, but recognition. He had faced unstoppable foes before. He had created unstoppable beings, but he had never encountered one that lacked the very concept of stopping. And for the first time, the Emperor shifted from defense to offense. Golden sigils ignited across his body, burning like miniature suns, and he raised both hands, channeling the psychic magnitude of a god who had once cowed 4 chaos gods simultaneously. The Doomslayer braced, recognizing the shift in pressure, and the Emperor unleashed a blast of psychic force so immense it shattered the bridge beneath them into 1,000 drifting slabs. I screamed as the fragments plummeted into the void, but both combatants remained suspended, floating on twin pillars of their own will. The Emperor hovered, wreathed in divine radiance. The Doomslayer hovered, held aloft by sheer animosity. Then the Emperor spoke again, softly, with devastating finality. "Your war ends here, Slayer, not because I choose it, but because you cannot comprehend what lies beyond this path." The Doomslayer lifted his fist and punched the Emperor in the face. Single continuous paragraph. The moment the Doomslayer stepped into the inner sanctum of the Imperial Palace, where even custodians dared not tread without ritual permission, I felt reality constrict around him as though the Emperor himself were tightening a fist around the fabric of existence. And in that pressure I sensed, for the first time, the Slayer's unspoken tension, a silent tightening at the edges of his indomitable resolve. For even he understood now that he stood not before another foe, not before another cosmic aberration, not before another demonic grotesquerie to be annihilated, but before the will of a being who did not merely command worlds, but shaped the destiny of the species that claimed this galaxy as inheritance. The air was dry and heavy, shimmering like glass about to fracture. And in those shimmering folds I could hear the faint memories of Terra's first ages, when humanity was still crawling from the ashes of old night, and the Emperor walked unseen among them, shepherding them toward some grand, terrible, luminous plan. And when the Slayer stepped forward, the floor rippled as though it resented the weight of a foreign god upon it, resisting, buckling, whispering with psychic static that scraped like talons inside the skull, and I, forced to watch through that strange linked vantage where I was neither present nor absent, felt the Emperor's latent aura pressing me downward, flattening breath, perception, sense of self, while the Doomslayer remained upright purely out of instinctual defiance, as if every cell within him had been forged around the principle of refusal to kneel, refusal to submit, refusal to acknowledge the authority of anything beyond the mission etched into the core of his being. A slow pulse of golden light breathed outward, and the throne room opened like a wound, revealing a horizonless inner space. A chamber larger on the inside than the world outside, woven into impossible geometries by the Golden Throne's fusion of science, sorcery, and sacrifice, its pillars rising into eternity like the vertebrae of some cosmic titan upon whose skeleton the entire Imperium balanced, its shadowed balconies filled with half-seen constructs, servo-skulls that had been fused with psychers long dead, and statues that wept light instead of water, gilded mechanisms older than the Horus Heresy, older even than the birth of the Primarchs. For a moment the Emperor's presence dimmed, not in weakness but in a kind of introspection, as though he were reading the Doomslayer's mind in a single boundless scan, absorbing lifetimes of brutality, perseverance, unbroken savagery, glimpsing the Slayer's war against hell as easily as one glances at a mural carved on a temple wall. And something in the atmosphere shifted, the faintest hint of acknowledgement. Not respect, not admiration, but awareness. A calculation that perhaps the Slayer's existence had implications beyond the boundaries of his own universe. And I felt the Emperor's thought vibrate across the chamber like a planetary engine warming. You are a weapon meant for a single purpose. And though the Emperor did not speak aloud, the Slayer clearly heard it, for his gauntleted fingers tightened imperceptibly on the super shotgun, and I could sense, yes, genuinely sense, a tremor of something like anger ripple through him. Not because of the Emperor's words, but because of the implication that his purpose had been assigned, that his path was dictated by forces beyond his control. This was the moment I realized that mattered more than any exchange of blows, more than any clash of unimaginable power, the moment where two beings who had defied hell and heresy, who had walked through the annihilation of worlds and emerged unbroken, confronted the possibility that neither was the master of their own fate, that both were, in some unreachable sense, prisoners of destiny, the Emperor bound to his throne, his empire, his golden burning duty, the Slayer bound to his rage, his eternal war, his endless cycle of slaughter and reawakening. And as these realizations simmered like molten ore exposed to air, a surge of warp lightning coiled around the throne's base, threading through the air like serpents of incandescent thought, responding to the Emperor's increasing focus. And the Doomslayer braced, torso lowering, armor plates shifting with mechanical readiness, as though his entire being were preparing itself not for attack but for the inevitable recoil of standing within the gravitational pull of a psychic god. The light swelled, gold mixing with something colder and paler beneath, like starlight filtered through the bones of the dead. And for a heartbeat I glimpsed memories not belonging to either figure, but to the warp itself. Battlefields after the fall of Prospero, the golden tears of Sanguinius streaking across the vengeful spirit's decks, the screams of 1,000,000 sacrificed psychers echoing through Terra's noosphere, and in that storm of recollection, the Doomslayer and Emperor both remained absolutely still, like statues carved from opposition and inevitability, until at last the Emperor's voice materialized with the weight of a collapsing constellation. You were not meant to exist in this realm. And instantly the warp flared like a star being born, tearing open around the Slayer's feet, spiraling upward like a column of screaming solar flame. Yet even as the universe bent to eject him, to purge the foreign element, he planted his boots deeper, muscles locking, armor groaning, and with a low, guttural snarl that sounded more like tectonic plates grinding than a human sound. He resisted, refusing to be erased, refusing to be undone, refusing even to acknowledge the authority that sought to cast him out. And though the Emperor did not move, his golden aura tightened like a vice around the Doomslayer's outline, compressing him between the invisible jaws of a god's intention. And still the Slayer held on, inch by inch, refusing, defying, enduring, until the psychic storm shuddered to a halt. Not because he overpowered it, not because he broke free, but because the Emperor allowed it to stop. Studying the Slayer now with a different kind of contemplation, as if newly aware of some variable he had not considered. The chamber stilled, the storm quieted, the golden light dimmed just enough that the world felt inhabitable again. And in that fragile silence, one truth became painfully, luminously clear. If the Emperor truly wished to banish the Doomslayer, or destroy him, or erase his universe from existence, he could. Yet he paused, and in that pause lay all the uncertainty, all the fragile possibility, all the cosmic dread that suggested this confrontation was not merely a test, but the opening act of something far more dangerous. The kind of event that shifts timelines, fractures destinies, and echoes across realities long after the stars themselves go dark. Chapter 6, single continuous paragraph. In the stillness after the halted psychic storm, a stillness so profound it felt as though Terra itself were holding its breath, the Doomslayer and the Emperor of Mankind regarded one another not as conqueror and adversary, nor as invader and sovereign, but as two beings carved from the marrow of unending war, each sculpted by forces that cared little for their suffering. And as that silence stretched thin as vellum, I sensed the raw, unfiltered truth radiating from the Emperor's presence. The Doomslayer was not merely an anomaly, not merely an intruder from a foreign timeline, but something that should not exist at all within the ordered structure of the Emperor's vision. A living paradox, a creature whose singular purpose clashed with the very foundation of the Imperium. For while the Emperor fought for the evolution of mankind, for the triumph of a species destined to inherit the galaxy, the Doomslayer fought for only one thing: the destruction of Hell, its demons, its corruption, its stain upon existence. A mission carved so deeply into his psyche that even the warp recoiled from it, unable to bind or sway him. And the Emperor, for all his power, recognized that this man, this unstoppable force of rage and righteousness, could not be controlled, not even by a god. The air shimmered again, not with aggression but with contemplation, golden strands tightening and relaxing like the breath of a colossus. And slowly, agonizingly, the Emperor's psychic presence shifted from a weapon into something colder, sharper, more invasive. A scan that pierced deeper than flesh or soul, threading through the Slayer's memories, examining every nightmare he had endured, every realm he had cleansed, every demon he had shattered beneath his boots. And I felt the Emperor pause, deep within the Slayer's mind, at the image of the divinity machine, the Argent energy, the sacrificial worlds, the betrayals, the endless corridors of Hell's labyrinthine cruelty. And for the first time in this confrontation, the Emperor's thoughts flickered with something like recognition, as though in the Doomslayer's suffering he glimpsed an echo, distant but unmistakable, of humanity's own torment during the Age of Strife, when demons roamed freely and psychers went mad and the warp devoured entire cities. Perhaps it was this echo that softened the Emperor's gaze, or perhaps it was merely the cold logic of a strategist who had long since ceased to entertain the luxury of sentiment. But whatever the reason, the throne room dimmed, the golden radiance withdrawing just enough that the Doomslayer could stand fully upright again, unbowed, unbroken, staring